Hi, thank you for waiting. Of course, in any virtual seminar, we have some technical issues, but we are all set now. And I am, first of all, thrilled to give a shout out to AGL Communication for their participation in our Y4Y iSummit and their incredible commitment to bringing the UK, LookUp UK, along with Europe into this global family. So I'm going to introduce you to Lucy Gordon-Lennox, the chair of AGL, and I will let it take off. Oh, and I'm Susan Reynolds, the co-founder of LookUp, and just so excited to see all of you here.
Hi there, everybody. Susan, thank you so much for that. It is so exciting to be here at the Youth for Youth Summit. We're really, really thrilled about it, particularly as we're about to listen to an interview with one of Britain's most gifted athletes about how social media is fueling racism in sport. So I'm really curious to learn more about this and what can be done to help. Before we start, I'd like to introduce AGL Communication and to say how pleased and honoured we are to be part of this global movement with lookup.live. It's such an honour for us to be a title partner along with the Social Dilemma, and working with Susan and Julie is incredible. I don't know if you ever go to sleep. We've never had that conversation, Julie or Susan, but they work 24 hours a day. They're amazing. AGL is a communications agency that's based in the UK. It helps talented people really from all walks of life to perform and communicate at their very best. We work with people in business and media, education, policymakers. We work with creatives and entrepreneurs. I could go on, but we're very, very fortunate and lucky. Recently, we've also started working with young people, and this honestly seemed to us to make completely perfect sense to us. Why can't young people have the same support too? Our objective is to help them become the very best version of themselves, whatever path they choose, and we can help them cut through that noise and give them some real clarity and purpose. So one of the reasons that we're involved with LookUp is that we feel in order to make the most of talent, you need to be in control of your emotions. Our entire philosophy is founded on the basis that emotional intelligence, which is the ability to regulate and control one's emotions, and more importantly, also connect with the emotions of other people, so huge awareness there, is absolutely essential to be the best at what you do and also enjoy it. So what's the link with LookUp? Well, as you know, social media can play havoc with our emotions. On a positive note, and I do like to be positive, social media can help us to create or innovate, to learn and find new interests, and it unites people from across the globe. It promotes lots of businesses. There are masses of positive things about it. Sadly, there is a flip side, and many young people have told us over the last few days. It's been it's been very profound what you've said. In your words, you've said things like social media can make us feel isolated, out of control, insecure, bullied, judged, lose sense of who we really are, and indeed who our real friends are. You've talked about eating disorders, self-harming, and addiction. Social media is addictive. The point being, it can create a tremendous amount of confusion and can be overwhelming. So what we've done at AGL after 2 years of extensive research on emotional intelligence, and with our many years of experience in communication, we've combined the two things together to produce what I think is a really relevant program for young people to help them make their own path to success in work and for their own personal development. It's really enriching in every way. Youth for youth, this is the most exciting part. All of you are contributing to such an important conversation. And as Claire said earlier, it doesn't end there. You're actually coming up with solutions for digital well-being, and that's just fantastic. There's so much conversation about so many things in the world, and sometimes you want to go, oh, just do something, just let's do something. So you're brilliant at taking responsibility. And as someone said yesterday, you know, I feel like I didn't sign up to this, just sort of landed. But that hasn't stopped you from working together and being really proactive and reminding us, that's the sort of older side of the young, so a bit older here, how relevant you all are. young people really, really matter. So we're here to listen and to support you in any way that we can. And I hope that many of you might actually engage in our challenge, AGL challenge that we're doing, which you'll find the details on the LookUp page, or indeed come and join us at one of our AGL Young Talent programs. I'd love to hand you over to Minnie. We did have a lot of technological problems earlier on, which was why we were running late, as Susan said. But Minnie is fantastic. She's an award-winning TV reporter for Channel 4 News and has been recognised for her commitment to covering mental health stories. Minnie, if you're there, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight to discuss this very important issue. Over to you, Minnie.
What a lovely introduction. I hope you can hear me because
yes,
we did have a few difficulties, but it is lovely to be here. I'm joined now by Nedum Onuoha, who is an icon of English football, playing for Manchester City, Sunderland, QPR, and doing what few Brits have ever done and cracking America, playing for Real Salt Lake City. He's now retired from the beautiful game, but do you ever really retire? And hosts the podcast Kickback with Nedum, and he joins us now. Nedum, thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Now, I wanted to start with a really simple question in many ways, and just to ask you kind of what your own relationship with social media is like. Is it a love-hate relationship? How would you describe your personal relationship with it?
Do you know, I think that's a good question, which doesn't come with a short answer, because I think for sort of my generation, you know, when we were younger, we didn't have social media, but we had things like messenger services through like AOL, MSN, that type of thing. And then that led to chat rooms. And then all of a sudden there was MySpace. And then after MySpace, there was Facebook. After Facebook, there was this, there was that. But for us, I think we were lucky in some ways because we didn't depend on it when we were really turning into the people that we are today. So the way that I see it now is that I do with it whatever I want to do. I think throughout my career, towards the later stages especially, there was the talk that you need to be on social media because it boosts your image, and your image is everything. You need to control this, manifest that. But I didn't, because for me, I enjoyed just being who I was. And as a consequence, you know, people would say that I missed out on this, but I knew that my experience on social media was ultimately very real, because through a private account, all the people who I saw on there were people who I see in real life. So whenever I opened up the platform, I was never being talked at. I was being talked to by people that I know. And that sort of difference in an experience is everything to this day why I'm still on it. Because if I ever get to a point where I feel like I'm being talked at by people who I don't know, you know, that experience is a long way from the reality of the world itself. Because think about how many people you walk past in your lifetime who will never come up and say something to you, but the amount of people who on social media will either come and find you or see you and then just say whatever they want because it's a different experience. And so for me, like, I understand how big it's become. I understand some of the huge positives involved, but I also see some of the negatives. And that's why, as a consequence, I'm trying to have a more realistic sort of feel for something which is clearly very virtual. So that's essentially my relationship with it.
You raise a really interesting point. There's a whole generation of people who have grown up with social media, many who kind of rest their self-esteem on it. But yet at times I know, you know, you have a private account on many of your social media networks. Why is that?
Like I said, it's to do with the experience that I want from the platforms. Like, I understand say, especially being an ex-footballer, the high of having like thousands of fans being able to access you and talk to you, you know, the engagements you can have with them, the sponsorship things you can do, the feeling of self-worth when you post a picture and like it's liked by so many people. Like, I understand that, but I don't really care about that. But the crazy thing is, within football, that kind of made me the exception. Upon saying that I have a private account, people would look at you funny, like you said something that's a bit crazy. But that's just what it was, because there were times, I'll be honest, there were times in the past when I had an open account, and one specifically was on Twitter. I had an open Twitter account, which was solely dedicated to me. Like, I have one now, which is more so for my podcast where I can be accessed. But there was one which was for me, I think it was in 2013, 14. And I'll just be sitting around, just living my life, and people were always talking at me. I was in a restaurant one time and some guy was criticizing me, saying he'd just seen me in the restaurant and this, that, and the other. And I thought, like, one of the downsides, the negatives of social media, if you have an open account and you are in the public eye, is that people will always want to deliver their opinions of you to you and not feel the sort of the same feelings you'd feel. Like if I was, as I say, I was in that restaurant and somebody tweeted from the restaurant at me, but they didn't come and see me and talk to me and say the same thing. And I didn't like that, because like, if I'm there, I'm not a hostile person. If you want to come and speak to me, like, I'm quite open, you can come and speak to me. But instead it shows that sense of like strength through anonymity. So they felt they could say whatever they wanted. And when you have that sort of anonymous feel, you say things that you'd never say in the real world and not worry about the consequences, not because of what somebody might do to you, whatever, but if you say something that upsets somebody in real life, you have a sense of empathy towards that person more often than not. If you say something virtually, you don't know how somebody's taken it and you don't care because they've not responded. So like I said, in terms of being private, I'm private, and everybody who requests, I accept them if I know who they are, because then I know exactly who I'm talking to, and they know exactly who they're talking to as well. So there's a different sense of accountability based on the things that I post, things that I say, things that they post, things that they say. So it feels like more of an extension of my real world as opposed to a separate world whereby, you know, these are the people who I interact with.
I mean, an important point there. One of the things about social media is that, of course, you know, people have anonymity, and a lot of the behaviours that they're demonstrating aren't necessarily new. But you know, people have racism as old as time, you know, abuse is as old as time. But they have this anonymity. Do you think that the social networks need to do more to police trolls and people who are racist and people who behave awfully online?
Yeah, I think they do. I think they do. But the anonymity in some ways is the strength of the platform as well as a negative, because there are tons of people who can have a great experience through that. There's certain types of engagement which people will have through, you know, just behind a face. You know, they can talk. People have had like long distance relationships with people who they've never met before and stuff like this. And you can say this, you say that, but you know, is it really this or is it really that? So the anonymity is something which I would never say has to be removed, because then that changes the whole process itself. But I do think that overall, especially listening to some of the stuff that was said recently from the whistleblowers and so on, the fact that there was an algorithm in play which was designed towards bringing in extra engagement, but the engagement then ended up being more negative than positive, that's what was really driving it. You know, there's no coming back from that, because all of a sudden, you know, there's lots of negativity around the place anyway, which then fuels added behavior, because you might see a post which makes you mad and you want to say underneath, this makes me mad, but then it means you're on social media and you're mad. And then before you know it, there are other people who make you mad, and they're all there and they're all accessible. So you can go and say whatever you want and not really feel great consequence. But in terms of Instagram policing it and other social networks, I think they can do more, but I think they can always get away with doing the bare minimum, because within, say, this conversation that we're having now, say we can reference it in terms of football, but football still only makes up a small part of the billions of people who have social media anyway. So the bare minimum will always be acceptable, because they sort of, their business plan and business idea is not designed around kicking people off the platform. It's about bringing people in and keeping them there for as long as possible. So with that, like, as I say, I think they can do more, but until you're at the table having true discussions about what to do next, you know, they can just fob you off with whatever they want to do and say that this is working, because at the end of the day, as I say, you're not part of strategy. You're just a little problem for them in the grand scheme of things.
We saw things come to a head during the World Cup, when we saw some of England's most high-profile players being racially abused. Many people talked about that as a kind of moment when it was truly shocking, but not surprising at all. I wondered, as a high-profile player yourself, you know, having played for England as well, if it's not too difficult, how were you feeling the next day after England's loss, after you saw, you know, all of the newspaper headlines? What was kind of going through your mind?
So in the European Championships, when that was going on, as soon as the penalties were missed, you know straight away, like, the game itself was the biggest game that we've seen England play in our lifetimes, essentially. Unless you're around for 66, that's the biggest moment. So there's a lot of pressure on it already, and there's a lot of anxiety in the air. People thinking, come on, England, you can do it. But then there's also the nagging doubt because you've not been there before. So you don't know what it feels like to win, to be successful. So it's a high pressure situation. And then the game goes how it goes, and it goes to penalties, the sort of cliche scourge of the England national team. And then you're worried thinking, what happens if, but you're not, like, for me personally, I thought to a point, I was thought more about what happens if England lose than what happens if England win, because there'll be two completely different things. And, you know, they missed the first penalty, they missed the second penalty, and now it's the penalty to Kits to stay in the tournament. And he misses it as well. And you know, it's like 3 black players. And based on what we'd seen for the sort of months and years before, that's when the sinking feeling came in. Because for me, like, I'm disappointed they didn't win. I'm disappointed for those 3 players, because that's the most pressure probably England players have ever been under. And you notice there's one thing that unites all 3 of them, and they're all black players. And at this point now, for me, the sense of disappointment because England didn't win was one thing, and it's the same for many others. But for others, it turned to anger. And whenever there's anger and there's social media and there's that anonymity and there's a way to vent your frustration, I thought, well, here we go. I thought something's definitely going to happen. And lo and behold, the next day, as you say, there were so many reports of some of the things that were said. And what makes that particularly toxic for me was for those players, they didn't send out a post that evening straight after the game, which people commented underneath for. People went to find them online to let them know how they felt about what happened the night before. And that's targeting individuals because you're so angry. But for me, the way that sport goes, like, you can be disappointed, but those players didn't really do anything that should have made people angry, in my opinion. So to see that happen, I wasn't surprised. The sheer volume was like, it kind of showed where we were, because for 18 months prior, we'd had more conversations about discrimination than we've probably had in my entire lifetime. Yet still, and people were saying, oh, don't kneel, don't do this, everything's fine, everything's whatever. But then you have a high profile moment like that and people revert to type and they do what they do. And the disappointment was there. And I just thought to myself, like, for me personally, being somebody who played football and is black, if a black footballer is being called anything, like, I feel like that's happening to me, that's happening to all of us, because we're all one and the same. Because if you say you were a black this, well, I'm not going to stand over here and say, oh, I'm fine, it's just talking to him. Like, I live in the same country as that person. I represent the same things that they do. And it was a very, very dark moment. But then in some ways, it was a good thing for some, because they decided that for them, some is the eradication of the gray area. You either thought it was okay or you thought it wasn't. And you spoke up if you felt either way about it.
Do you think social media has kind of amplified and worsened the problem of racism? Because, of course, you know, it's not in the root of the problem. Racism in football is not a new thing, but it's merely migrated online. Is it more problematic now for players? Now we have social media and it is so prolific, or is it just a new vehicle for racism?
I think it's just another arm to it, essentially, because racism for me, you know, well, everyone can see that it's been a thing for the longest time, but through social media, there's another way to be able to deliver it. There's another way to show anger, you know, and we're talking solely about racism, but we can talk about all levels of discrimination on there. Like, it is a vehicle for people to be able to go out and vent their frustrations, because say, if the same amount of people who probably have some of the worst thoughts in the world probably still existed 5-10 years ago, but you would never really hear from them unless they delivered it probably to your face or in some other means. But now you're accessible to people 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, whether you like it or you don't. So as far as social media goes, for me, like, it can bring out the absolute worst in people, and it makes it easier for them because, you know, what's the consequence? What's the consequence? When there doesn't feel like there is any, they won't say anything. Like, some of the people being abused, men, women, things like this, some guys or people would never say this to them in real life. But when you can just flick up your phone while sitting on your sofa watching TV and drop in something which is absurd, like, it's easy. So social media in some ways makes it easy for the worst people in society to be able to spew some of their worst views and only face the consequence of maybe being banned from 24 hours should the thing that they say be reported. You know, so many conditional things there. But I just think it's not right because it means that there's an unfair sort of experience being had by people who deserve better, in my opinion.
Now, I know you've kind of engaged with lots of social media blackouts recently as a sort of strategy. How effective have you found social media blackouts?
Again, I think that's a good question because I'm a borderline cynic about certain things, but then in the same breath, I understand that something is always going to be better than nothing. And I think for most of my life, there has been a sort of sense of nothing. So something that even appears superficial, you know, someone's just, I don't know, they're pretending to be interested in something like that. The fact is the conversation's still there. So it's more than nothing. And I hope for more and I hope it gets better. But I'm not going to criticize something until I can come up with something that's better and something that's like objectively better. So to get behind some of the programs and stuff which are being done, some of the shows of unity, like I'm with it. I'm all for it. It's great. And, you know, only for me, it should only be criticized when there is something which will have a bigger impact. So regardless of whatever, you know, some of the negatives might be of something, you know, I'm still going to be on board because, as I say, for the longest time, there hasn't been anything at all. Yet still in the last 18 months through things being done, whether it's kneeling, whether it's the blackouts, like it creates the conversation, and those conversations have not existed. And these are conversations which aren't going away. And it kind of reveals a lot when people say they're tired of it. Like some people say they're tired of watching people kneel. Like people kneel for 3 seconds before a game of football. If your life is so troubled by somebody kneeling for 3 seconds before you get your 90 minutes worth of football, like, you know, what does that really say about you and your sort of interest in, you know, trying to make the world essentially a better place for everybody?
What do you think Silicon Valley needs to do to make significant change? I know you've talked about them kind of doing the bare minimum, and obviously money seems to be crucial to social media companies, and that's always comes first normally. But what do you think they should implement to actually have proper impact?
I think, you know, it's a capitalist society, so money is always going to be the driver. And until something's costing money, there probably won't be enough change. But then, like, who's going to find a social media company when they basically have more users than most nations have citizens? You know, they are powerful all around the world through doing what they do, and they're only getting bigger when you think about it. So I don't know. And I think there's another split here to be had, because I think we can talk about stuff that goes on social media, but the real change comes when, like, society itself is changing, if you know what I mean. So you can try and control environments like social media, but it doesn't necessarily change the views of some of the people who have some of the worst views in the world. It just means that they might not come onto this platform to be able to say it. And even though that does help people in terms of not being abused and so on online, does it really overall help them in the real world in society? Because that's the thing itself. Like, social media is great, but for most people, it's also not real. You know, it's not a place where people will be themselves 100% of the time. In some ways, it's a marketplace. People selling things, whether it's themselves for this or selling actual products and stuff like that. So I think they can, I think they can definitely make it a safer environment. They can make it so that certain words and so on can't be said, because at the end of the day, these are technological giants. You know, some of the major feats in technology have happened through forms of social media and so on. So I'm sure they can do it. Whether or not they will do it, I don't know, because then that means probably a drop in engagement for them. And a drop in engagement probably means a drop in money. So if it's going to cost them money to fix a problem, I seriously doubt that they'll be trying to do that.
Okay, Nedum, I think we've just got a couple of questions coming in, if we may. One from Lucy asking, is the racism in stadiums of a different character to the racism that might be experienced online in terms of its impact, I'm guessing?
I think any racism that happens in real life hits differently to stuff that happens on social media, because the one on social media it can catch you off guard and it can get you really wound up, really upset and stuff like this. But you can kind of like block a person in some ways, and you can say, you know, this person doesn't have a face. They're just this. It's the same as like some of the people that do things like that. The same as like when people get angry when they're in the car. You know, they never do it if they were on the street walking, but when in the car, they feel like, oh, look at this idiot doing this. Like, it's a different set of emotions. But when it's in a stadium and you see the person's face and they're right there, like who's to say you'll never see that person again? So if somebody's called you something or thinks of you as less than a human being, and you see them, this is somebody who might be working in a bank, somebody that might be just walking down the street with a dog, somebody that, you know, might have another effect on your life and affecting not just your life, your family's lives, your children, that type of thing. So when you see the real face of people who have some of the worst views in the world, it catches you off guard. It can get you really angry, and it's a reminder of where you are. And you know, I've had some of that a few times in my life, not necessarily in football, but like in the real world. And it does remind you where you are, because it's very easy to get comfortable. But then it only takes one person to make you realize that your surroundings are not how you hope. And from when that's the case, then, you know, you look at it through a different lens.
Question from Christine now. Was there a difference between football culture in the US versus England? I know you've spoken about after the murder of George Floyd that you didn't feel very safe in America. Did you notice a difference in the stands in terms of, you know, English football and soccer?
Yeah, there's a difference. There's fundamental differences in terms of the way that the game's played and so on. But one thing about being in America, which was very apparent from the get-go, is you realize like there's a huge sense of like national pride and patriotism. And I think that's great. But then to a certain extent, some of that hides the nationalism that exists within it. So there are tons of great people, but say you get there and it always blew my mind that you'd have to sort of listen to the national anthem for every sporting event, for every game, for everything. So when it then came down to, say, certain instances, like, say, the murder of George Floyd and other things like that, you know, saying that we wanted to kneel, lots of people were behind you, but then some other people were very much against you. But they were against you not because of, say, the George Floyd situation. They were against you because you were peacefully protesting. But what blew my mind was, as somebody who is a foreigner, you know, you take it in for what it is, you hear everything. And in the Constitution, there's a bit that's protected about peaceful protest. And, you know, when people go to war, they go to war essentially to protect the Constitution of the United States of America. So the people going to war are essentially protecting your rights to be able to peacefully protest. But when you kneel for the anthem, some people call you a disgrace. And like, I could never get my head around that. Whereas in the UK, you know, because they don't have the playing of the anthem, like the build up to games and stuff is different. So you don't have as much time to be able to try and, you know, send a message or to do stuff like that. So it was different. It was very much a different audience. And I think in some ways as well, the soccer audience in America is less tribal than the football audience in England, because in England, as anybody who's been over here, like it's literally at times a case of life or death when it comes down to the fan bases and what you do to their club and what you do before games, during games and after games. And it literally is a case of life or death. So it's not quite that in America, but other things kind of matter more over there.
Question from Lucy now. Do you think clubs are doing enough for their players' mental health? Are they doing enough to protect them when they're, you know, subject to hate speech on social media?
I think they're doing enough is subjective, because every player is ultimately very different. Like, I know some players who go on social media to try and rile reaction and wind people up. So when they're getting abused, like they're all up for it. Whereas there are other players who might receive one negative comment, which will then affect their training session, which will affect their game on a Saturday, which could affect their whole season and career. So I think it's about knowing each individual player, but players aren't great in terms of coming forward and being honest about their sort of status or just their feelings. One of the big downsides of football, especially in England, is like the sort of show up and get on with it type nature of it. Like, no, I can't show weakness. I cannot show weakness. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. But lots of people aren't fine. But as far as clubs go, unless people are telling them, they can only do what they think is working. But unfortunately, lots of things aren't working. So they could do more, but then that, you know, it's a two-part thing. I think the players have to buy into it as well.
Really interesting question from Kathy now. Nedum, you indicated earlier on that you know how to manage your own value and what others think of you. How would you advise younger people who are kind of maintaining a sense of self and self-esteem through social media sometimes? How can you sort of advise them to believe in themselves outside of that?
Do you know, I think it ultimately depends on sort of like their friend groups and how they all use social media together. Depends on like when they go on social media, what you're going on for. Are you going on to find something to make you feel happy? Are you going on to find something that's going to make you feel sad? Are you going to post something in the hope that lots of people are going to like it? Because if you are going on for that with that sense of hope that something will be liked, you know, there is another side to the coin where you can feel disappointment, but you should never feel disappointment about something that you like yourself, because that is the key, isn't it? You know, if you can get a feel for who you are, what you like, and have the right people to sort of allow you to be yourself, then I think that's key. Because I think for lots of us, not necessarily myself to a certain extent now, like there's almost like a quest for validation, but the quest for validation means that you might become something which you're not. And as soon as you start becoming something that you're not, will you ever really be happy? So I think that's key. If you can find a way to be yourself in the real world, find a way to be yourself on social media, then I think you'll have more positive experiences than negative. But if you're on the other side of things, then, you know, and you just go in essentially whichever way the wind blows, that's a tough position to be in. But I do feel for youngsters in this era, because it's almost like you have to be on there. But then I suppose it just depends on you, your friendship, your support, like in terms of family and things like that. And if you have good people around you, then I think in the end, you'll be able to work through any issues.
Well, I think that's good advice for all of us, to be honest. Now, the other thing we were going to ask you, we've got another question coming in here, saying, we sort of touched on this earlier, but be interested to get your take on it within this context. Should we get to a stage where we kind of disallow anonymous to negative comments on social media?
I don't know. Because you could have just an egg for an avatar on your profile, and you could be on the page of a company and you could be criticizing the company based on some negative service that they've done towards you. And you could be angry, but isn't that also negative feedback on social media about something? So if you want to say it should be banned, then like there's going to be a lot of other, like not every interaction on social media needs to be positive, but then it's just, I suppose it's that when it crosses that threshold towards being exceptionally sort of harmful in some ways, but then that the bar for harmful is different depending on different people. Like I know some people who could get called the worst words in the world and it not affect them, but other people might get, say players wise, might just get told that you had a bad game today and that could completely break them. So I think it's tough, but this is why like social media itself will just keep going forever, because there'll never be one set way to fix something that appears to be a problem, because for lots of people it won't be a problem, and as a consequence you trying to deliver some way to change it will be met with huge resistance because they're having a different experience. You know, like when you go on social media, everybody's having a different experience. Gone are the days where everybody logs onto one website, everyone sees the same front end, you go on to the next stage, it's the same thing. Like that's gone. So people's perceptions and realities are being changed on a sort of minute to minute basis whilst they're on there. So I don't think you can get rid of the negative comment thing, because some conversations and stuff warrant it, but you just hope that the people who have access to you will understand you enough to know what is right and what is wrong. But for lots of people, when you are followed by anonymous, when you're followed by hundreds of thousands, like for context, 1% of people not liking you doesn't seem a lot until maybe you have 100,000 followers. And then you have a pool of 1,000 people who might at any given moment give you some stick, and 1,000 people versus one, all of a sudden feels like it goes beyond bullying. It's a little bit crazy.
You've obviously got certain strategies in place to protect yourself online, but does it ever get you down? Is your mental health affected by social media, or are you fairly resilient?
No, I'm resilient. But it still gets you, because it's human nature. You could have 100 comments and 99 could be that you've done something incredible, but that one, which is negative, it tends to stick with you in a greater way than the 99 previous. So it always gets you. And like, as I say, I've got an open Twitter account now, mostly because of my podcast. And to be completely honest with you, every time I do some form of media where there's like a clip sent out or something like this, I log on to Twitter expecting to see abuse. I literally expect to see abuse. And that's a tough feeling because I don't really want to press the button, but there are other people who want to talk to me and engage me about opinions and talk about stuff which I've said. And I want to be there to speak to them, because that is the positive of social media. People who you might never meet, you can engage with. They don't need to be in your neighborhood. Like I'm having conversations with people that are thousands of miles away, and it's great. That's great conversation. But then there are just other people, and when you know they're there, and say when you do what I do, when you talk about football, which is one of the most tribal industries in the world, every time you open your mouth, you're thinking, well, I'm sure somebody is going to have a significant issue with this. Even when you're trying to be nice, you're not nice enough. And yeah, as a consequence, like my coping mechanism is to just, I go on there to speak to the people who are worth it, but then just try and make sure that I block out anything which just goes too far in the country. Like because we can read, you just see it and I just keep swiping. I don't go back to it. I don't linger with it. I don't try and engage with them. I accept the fact that it's there, but take strength in knowing that they are the minority and it's not going to affect my whole experience. I've heard it, probably disagree with it 99.9% of the time, but we keep moving, because at the end of the day, I can put my phone back in my pocket, look around, see my wife, my 3 kids, and get on with life.
You've kind of touched upon that in your last answer, but I was wondering, we've talked a lot about the negative side of social media, but when is it a force for good? When in your own life do you think, actually, this is benefiting me in some way, if you ever do?
Yeah, in terms of benefiting me, like, because I have the podcast, I'd like more people to listen to it, and I like the engagement that comes after a show's been out, because with my show, like, you get to hear a side of stories which you've never heard before. So when people hear it, I like when they talk about certain sections of it and they've never knew this, or they really like this person, because like the show's not about me, it's about the guests, and the guests choose to come on because they want to be honest about things for once. Because as a player, like when you do most of your media, you're either talking about the game that's been or the game that's to come, and it's never about you or anything that you've done. So like the guys can talk because they're talking about themselves, and it's the easiest way to make a good account for yourself, because somebody's not talking about you. You can say, well, I did this then because I just felt like this, and even though that happened, I found this, and that's really, really interesting. And when I share that with the audience and they then come back to me and talk about it, we can have some great conversations about stuff that we've seen. And I like that feel of community, because we're all united around like listening. Like as a host, I'm listening into the story the same way that a listener is. So I'm all in. So to get the chance to speak with people about that is fantastic. It really is fantastic. So that's the positive for me from that side, because I know that the work which I'm doing is of benefit, because it's changing people's perceptions of players, football clubs, and the game itself to a point whereby it's more real for many, as opposed to the cliches which get thrown out 6.5 days of the week, which serve no purpose whatsoever. So like I said, for me, that's the bit that I enjoy the most, like people talking about the shows or talking about things which I've been on, because some of that engagement, like football, people love football, they love it. So to get the chance to be able to talk to other people about it and see that you can change slight perceptions on people, on teams, on the industry, like that's what I'm all about, because they're having a far more real experience.
And just finally, Silicon Valley execs famously didn't let their own children onto social media, knowing too well the effects of it. I wonder what's your dad's strategy when it comes to social media? I know you've got 3 kids. Do you allow them on social media? Are you a strict dad? Are you do you let them socialize? What's your sort of strategy in place?
I'm only 34, so my kids are still quite young, but I'm counting the days until all of a sudden the conversation arrives and it's like, well, such and such is on Instagram and such is on Instagram. Should I not have an Instagram? And then at that point, like, it's gonna be a tough conversation, because you know of the highs, but you do know of the lows. So then I think it's a case of understanding your child and understanding what they can cope with, as opposed to just saying, well, no, you can't do this and no, you can't do that, because there are upsides to it. So yeah, I think in a few years we'll have to have those conversations. But for now, like, I pretend it doesn't even exist and we don't have to worry about it.
Do you think when you were younger, would you have loved to have had Instagram and TikTok and all those things? Can you think back to yourself being a teenager, and would you have loved to have posted selfies at 15 or 16? It's been incredibly embarrassing.
Well, to show our age, because I'm guessing you're probably similar age to me, like, we didn't have a camera phone.
Yeah.
So we were like basically like approaching 20s or in our 20s. So posting selfies and stuff, that would have been a disposable camera, which was then developed. And then where would you be posting it? You know what I mean? So no, I'm happy. I'm happy with what I think our generation can be a significant one, because we've seen the rise of technology within people's lives, but then we've been raised without it. So we can have a better balance in terms of when to be on it, when to be off it, and so on. Like, we don't need it. We know deep down we don't need it, even if at times we act as if we do. Whereas for some of the other people, they need it because that's all they've ever known. So I'm happy that I didn't have to do that when I was a kid. And don't get me wrong, I would have preferred faster internet speeds, or been able to like contact people in a way which wasn't just calling through the landline, hoping that somebody can answer, or organizing to meet someone on the weekend at this time, at this place, but then fully trusting they're going to be there, because if they weren't, there's no means to find out where they are. You know, those made for some interesting times, but I enjoy them. I celebrate them, but I'm happy to also know how to use today's technology. But I'm glad that I'm looking at it through the eyes of somebody who didn't need it when they were younger.
Yeah, I'm eternally grateful that there's no digital trace of my teenage years. The other thing that I was going to ask you is, you know, we look at social media now and we see people using it all the time, and it is as compulsive and as addictive as drugs or alcohol. Do you see people around you using it in that way? It sounds like you've got a pretty healthy relationship with it, but can you see the parallels with other addictive?
Yeah, without a doubt, especially while I was playing, because let me sort of tell you the story of football. You know, everybody arrives into training, you hang around together, you get ready for the training session, you go out and train. Then as soon as you come back in, everybody sits down, and the first thing they do, they pull out their phone. But what they're pulling out their phone for, it's not necessarily to call someone or to text someone. You pull out the phone and you just see them just swiping just like this. Every single day I used to see it, and I had to think, wow, this is crazy. So, you know, from like an early spot when you could put limits in terms of how long to be on social media for, like I was putting it in. But for others, like, you can just do it and do it and do it and lose track of time, like where you are. And that's like, that digital sort of system of just being trapped in there is probably similar to the same way, like, there are no windows at a supermarket, there are no windows at a casino. Like, everything's geared towards keeping you there for as long as possible, and you don't realize it. And lots of people fall into that, especially the ones who say have more followers and stuff, because there's more stuff, more people reaching out to you. There are more things with an algorithm targeting you, more people reaching out to you to try and offer this venture, offer that venture, liking this, liking that. Oh, there's this car, there's this thing. Some of these like really false things that you think could potentially like change your life forever. You know, they're just delivered to you on your page, and you just keep looking and looking and looking and looking. But then you also have that social connection where, well, your friends posted, so obviously you have to like it. Like, yeah, I saw it firsthand, and I saw it more so with the younger people, because, you know, their whole lives have been based around it. And in some ways, like, validation on there has the same value as validation in real life. And that's like, that unfortunately is a bit of a danger.
If you're being entirely honest though, do you get endorphins or validation when you take a picture and you get hundreds of likes? Do you ever think that's given me a boost?
No, to be honest, no, I don't. And the reason I say that is because I don't really post a lot of pictures. So that's the big thing for me. I think on Twitter, if I've got a show on a Friday to get released, I'll do a bit of a lead in where I'll do some engagement thing on a Wednesday, ask a question, which is to do with something coming on the Friday. And the more likes and reshares I get from that, puts me in a more positive mind state for thinking how the episode will go come the weekend. And then, you know, when the episode comes itself, I'm seeing how many people are liking it, how many people are resharing it, how many people are commenting on it. And, you know, it gets you it made me better throughout the process, because I then got a better feel for what people wanted. Because at the end of the day, like I'm not recording it for myself, I'm recording it for them. So that would be the only thing in terms of a high. But then in real terms, if it's on my private Instagram and so on, like tons of people could like a post, but like, so what? You know what I mean? Like, so what? If it's something that really matters to me, I've probably shared it with people in the real world. If it's a picture of my child, if it's a picture of somewhere we've been, I'm in group chats with people and I'll share it there. I'll talk about it there. So some of the best parts of me, which I feel the most proud about, aren't necessarily things I post on social media. I post things on social media when I want a big group of people to see something, but the real me doesn't exist on there.
Nedum, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for sharing all of your insights, and for everybody who's joined us this evening. It's been fascinating. We could talk for hours on this subject, but sadly we do have to go. But I'll see you where it counts on social media. Thank you to everybody.
Fantastic, Nedum.
Thank you very much.
And Minnie, absolutely fantastic conversation, and absolutely, Minnie, we could just continue, couldn't we? Unfortunately, we have another session, but I do want to thank everybody for being here, and really to remind you that there's an amazing competition opportunity to work with AGL, to become an advocate, to really polish your voice and authentic voice. And you can get there at lookup.live/United Kingdom, and there will be more opportunities to look. And Nedum and Minnie, what a treat, what an honor to listen to this engaging conversation. And I'm sure people will reach out to you on the Whova app and continue the conversation, and really applaud everything you're standing for and speaking for. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.